All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And we are wrapping up the year of the monster with a very interesting one, a monster you don't often see, but is always kind of there. We've been around ones that we don't see, but this monster is much more spiritual, staying in the holiday theme of being in the spirit here. And we're going to be doing possession movies for the month of December. And we're starting off with one, Taking of Deborah Logan. Now, Dave, this is your first time seeing this. I'm very excited to kind of see how you land on this one. So in a section that we are calling Taken without Liam Neeson, what do you think about the Taking of Deborah Logan?
Okay, I still don't know what to think about this movie. And usually I see this like a day or two before, right? I happen to have a little bit of time on Saturday. So I saw this thing on Saturday. I've had, 4 days to think about this thing. I still don't know what to think about this. Ultimately, because I've got lots of thoughts. I think this movie is phenomenally made.
Right.
I don't think there's any question about that. This is a good movie. It is an objectively good movie. It hits close to home. As dementia is a key plot point to the movie, I don't think that the use of dementia as a doorway to possession makes it a MacGuffin.
Right.
It is much more than a MacGuffin in this movie. And I think that how it handles dementia is, number one, fairly accurate to what my experience with a family member with dementia was like. But I think it also handles it somewhat or mostly with respect.
Right.
But it doesn't take away that it hits close to home for me. So I don't know if ultimately I liked the movie for that reason. I also had I haven't quite finished Agatha All Along. We've got an episode left, and I had just seen the episode with Lilia. I don't know if you've seen the show.
I've not watched Agatha All Along yet. It's hopefully going to be a Christmas break binge for me. It
is very horror leaning, so it's not straight up horror, but there is lots of horror elements in it. And there is an episode with a witch who experiences time like out of order. Okay. And it's obviously a very dementia coded episode. So all of that mixed with the fact that almost 3 years later, I'm still not over my grandfather's death, Right. And his battle with dementia was a long one, and it was a difficult one for our family. And not that the entire family wasn't there to support, because they were, but I shouldered a lot of that burden. And by my own decision to do so, because I've got a mother, his daughter, and I've got an aunt and an uncle that were there the whole way. But I made myself available to that. And so a lot of what's in this movie just hit a little too close to home for me.
Fair.
Which I think is a sign of a movie that does something. So we'll find out. I will find out as we discuss where I finally land on this thing. I will say nothing to actually take away from how objectively good a movie this is.
Okay, fair. No, so this is a movie I was very excited for you to see, because this is one that I like a lot, and I like it for a couple of different reasons. Now, I hadn't seen this thing since it came out. Like, this was a theater watch for me in 2014. I just remember like the bits, the bolts, the nuts and bolts that kind of held it together. I remembered it was found footage, which, we kind of keep accidentally finding ourselves in, which is fine with me. Like, that's how I think that found footage should be, right? Like, I think that if we did an entire month dedicated to found footage or something, that you end up, having to slog through some shit. But so I like the way that this approaches that. I also had a grandfather with dementia. And so it does kind of strike home. There's one scene in particular when we get talking about the story that just, even it. So now, 10 years later, watching it again for the second time, like, that was a fresh hot knife to the chest, catching that scene again. So I do like all of that. One of my favorite things about this movie is its approach to possession, in the fact that we're not dealing with a Pazuzu or a Paimon. We're not dealing with the King of Hell. We're not even dealing with a demon, right? So I do think, and we're going to discuss the actual possession later, but I think that when you get into possession stories, the story of somebody being possessed by something other than a demon or, a god, even if you get into Serpent and Rainbow, where they're doing voodoo possession rituals. I think that when you get into this idea of a malevolent spirit possession, there's something very interesting there. So I do like that, and more to come on that later. The thing about this movie ultimately, though, that makes me like it is that makes me really, really like it is we do a lot of movies. They're all horror. Occasionally there's the one that is strictly, like you said, are like horror coded. Like, okay, they wanted me to think this is a horror. They got me with the okey doke. Jeremy Gardner, maybe we're looking at you, but whatever. It happens. But even movies that are straight up cannot be called anything but horror, aka your Terrifiers. Sometimes those movies aren't scary. Sometimes there's a movie that is a straight up horror movie that relies on gore, comedy, whatever. It's obviously a horror movie, but it's not scary. This movie scares the ever loving shit out of me. This movie is scary. It is a wonderful use of found footage to create the chaos that leaves you, kind of wrapped up in everything. The fact that you're never 100% sure what's going to happen next because there's not just a camera two, so you can get another angle. You're always stuck in this one locked perspective for now, unless it's some of that B-roll that happens in the middle. And then they still jump between, but you're never 100% sure exactly how much time has passed. I think that adds to the scary. I think that they don't lean in super hard on this being some sort of demon or something. Even with the fact that this is a possession movie, this movie is strongly, strongly, strongly rooted in realism until it's not, right? until it's just absolutely not. Everything about this movie is very, very rooted in, oh shit, I could see this happening. So all of that is very scary. But man, some of the jump scares, some of the just absolute nonsense, because when this thing goes off the rails and becomes completely fucking unhinged, they let it stay off the rails. It wasn't a minor diversion, and then they're like, okay, track it back now. No, fuck no. When this movie just absolutely blew the doors off of anything realistic or hitting close to home, They just started swinging for the fences, man. And I love that because you know what? Sure, let's do it, right? If we've reached this point where you're now creating what your possession story, you're now creating your idea of what happened to Deborah Logan, then yeah, then just go. It is yours. You are now writing the rules. And they do a lot in this that is so bizarre. And when I saw this 10 years ago, thinking I'm in for, your typical Emily Rose, Haunting of Connecticut, Last Exorcism type movie, some of the shit that happens in this is so bizarrely shocking that you can't help but be horrified. And so I think that all of that equates to a movie that it's pretty good. I do really like this. So let's get into it. Let's get into it a little bit more here. And so in a section that we're calling Not Your Average Possession Tale, I've already told you, this is not a Pazuzu. This is not a Paimon. This is not a demon of any sort as far as we know. This is possession by malevolent spirit. How does that create a movie for you?
I think that works on two different levels for me. And on one level, I think it's brilliant. And on another level, I still don't know how to feel about it. On the one level that I think is brilliant, maybe this is something, and stop me if we get too personal, right?
Fair.
But maybe this is something that you experienced with your grandfather. But there were times where I was looking at him, talking to him, and I knew I wasn't looking and talking to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was someone else. And it was him, because obviously it is on some level, even if it's a primal level, that person exists in there, always existed in there. But when the person that you've had a relationship with is a certain way for your entire life, and then all of a sudden you're looking at him, you're like, you're not looking at me the same way. You're not talking to me the same way. That is terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. And I remember the first time I felt it years after he had been diagnosed with dementia. I finally saw that and I was like, that's a different person. And like the psychology of it, the physiology of it, the science of it, I mean, you know it. But until you experience it yourself, it doesn't really make sense.
Exactly.
And I think that this movie gets at that amazingly, because at its core, the idea that someone has been taken over by someone else, that's exactly what dealing with someone with dementia is like. So I was constantly feeling for Sarah, because beyond the no, mom, you've been there before. Remember, like you've been to Germany. Like that whole scene was so sad. It was pitiful, because I remember what that was like, right? Now on another level, the idea that, and I will say they do a really good job of explaining this.
Yeah.
They do a really good job of explaining this, that the people most susceptible to possessions are the very young and the very old, because as the mind becomes weaker, you open it up to the possibility of another spirit occupying your mind. They explain all that very well. And as someone who grew up in a deeply Catholic household, that's the way possession was explained to us, because the devil is a real entity for Catholics.
Yes.
I remember watching behind the scenes footage and like interviews and stuff with Linda Blair when she was talking about the making of The Exorcist. And she grew up, I don't know if it was Episcopalian or Pentecostal or some denomination of Christianity that wasn't Catholic. And she said, like, the devil wasn't real for me. It was like, so for me, like, I didn't have that religious connection to the devil as like a real guy that might come into my body. She was like, for me, it was a fantasy that I was making. But for someone, and I am, if I am a Catholic today, I am the worst Catholic you've ever met. I don't really consider myself to be a Catholic or religious at all. But your upbringing is always there, you know?
Right.
So that's how we were taught, is that if you open yourself up to it, if you allow your body, your mind, your soul to weaken to the point that a malevolent spirit could take it over, that's when that stuff happens. So they explain that really, really well. And they do a really good job of explaining like the science behind the dementia. So it all makes sense within the rules of the game that they're playing here. But I don't know how to feel about using a disease as a gateway.
Right.
I don't know how I feel about that. Dementia removed, because I feel a certain way about dementia, and I don't feel like they were being disrespectful to dementia. I don't know how I feel about some sort of disability, some sort of disorder, some sort of disease being used as a plot point.
No, I mean that's absolutely fair, you know, and that is something that we run across on occasion, and we've discussed about some other movies. It's interesting because there's part of me that agrees with you, and there's part of me that almost wants to view this as some sort of coping mechanism, right? As some sort of some sort of, you know, like the person who was writing this dealt with this, and they were like, well, what if there was some awful reason other than just their body attacking them and science doesn't understand it, that this happened to my loved one, right? What if I can take this and I can spin it into something to where I can put forth on screen for other people how horrifying this was for me personally. I do think that while you're absolutely right, there is a bit of catharsis to be found in this. Now, to be 100% honest, I know Dick all about Gavin Hefferman and whether or not he wrote this because of that. But by casting myself into this, right, by projecting what I see and feel from this, I can view this as a way to you know, that I had to see it, so now you do too type thing.
Yeah.
But dementia doesn't hit as hard when it's someone else's loved one. You know, if you are fortunate enough to have never had to go through that, then I hope you never do. I hope your parents, grandparents, whoever you may have as a listener that are still alive, I hope that they live happy and healthy until they don't anymore, and it's just a smooth transition. Because, like you said at the top, it's awful. And, you know, the whole premise at the beginning of the movie of, you know, does it have a physiological effect on the people around the Alzheimer's patient? I feel like all of that was very cathartic to who was writing it. And like I said, I very well may be projecting my own shit, because that is kind of where I came from with this. Is I watched
it feels like it. Like to me, there's no way that this isn't an exploration of grief by someone who had to cope with dementia.
Yeah. And so if you have had to live through that, you can, like I said, you start projecting kind of your own shit on it. And you're just like, well, God, you know, at least there was something there. There was something physical that Sarah could blame, once they figured out what was going on. Because one of the absolute worst parts of dealing with a loved one with dementia and Alzheimer's is there's nothing to blame. You can't sit back when it's all over and been like, fuck, I wish I would have got them to quit smoking, like you can if you know, if they smoked forever and died of lung cancer. You can't wish you'd got them to quit drinking or eat healthier, like if it was heart disease. Alzheimer's gives no fucks who you are or what kind of life you've led.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to grab onto. And that's one of the things that makes it so difficult to you need somewhere to channel that, right? You've got to point that anger at something. And there's nothing with Alzheimer's except for your loved one's brain. And so then you get caught in this really bizarre fucking grief cycle of being mad about it, and then there's nothing they can do. It's you know, you're constantly comparing. It's that same thing like when a kid does something really shitty, but they're 2, so it's like, well, he didn't know that he, you know, that he just that slamming my balls with that bat was going to debilitate me for the next 18 hours. It's that it's that same thing.
Accurate.
Yeah, you need, and so by creating this idea that the Alzheimer's is still there, she still has Alzheimer's, but but now there's something to be mad at, there's something to blame, because she's as bad as she is because of this asshole from their town. And so I think that you did say at the top that it does become more than just a MacGuffin, and I agree with you completely. And so I do. The writing of this movie seems like it was a very therapeutic exercise for the people who created this movie.
The other thing that I really like about this is something you mentioned at the top. They get at the horror of it. It is genuinely scary.
Yes.
As much for Sarah and Mia and you know, the whole film crew as it is for Deborah, because her disorientation early on comes through.
Yeah.
And this is a movie that manages to be a couple of different things at once, because and never get bogged down by either of those things. Because I feel like there are instances in which movies that cross genres get bogged down in one of those genres. Like police procedurals that are like thrillers, right? Oftentimes, like, they get stuck in the, like, hey, so here's like the police procedural part of this, right? And now here's the serial killer, so we're gonna do the thriller part of this.
It's like, here's a 15-minute scene of us running lab work. Like, okay,
exactly.
That's the opposite of thrilling, but let's go.
Exactly, right. Like, yes, I know you're gonna put on gloves. You don't have to do the whole snap. Like, I fucking got it. You know, you're a professional. I've seen CSI. We've all seen CSI. It never gets bogged down in either the medical drama, the academic research aspect,
right,
or the horror. It never gets bogged down in either of those things, and always moves swiftly from one thing to the next. I loved the fact that Mia turns to the camera crew after she talks to Deborah and says, yeah, no, my grandfather didn't die of dementia.
Yeah.
It was such a real moment that immediately I was like, yeah, she's definitely a grad student.
Yeah.
Because she has decided that this is what she's doing her thesis on. And that's it. Ain't nothing going to deter her. Which is as scathing a review of academia as I think you can get anywhere. That one comment. Because I find that many times, and I'm not even going to say it's most of the time, because as someone who's been to grad school twice, the majority of the people that I have encountered have been fine, upstanding people who are very much concerned with the moral implication of their work. But there are people who don't care.
Yeah.
And the only thing they want to do is they want to get that research.
Publish or perish.
Publish or perish. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. And she has she's put all her eggs into this basket, and damn it, she's going to publish because she refuses to perish. I like that. I like that that's there because that's really real. Because all the things that you hate about that, just like with the medical aspect of this, the fact that Dr. Nazir is always willing to be there and always willing to listen. I like that it wasn't that she had terrible bedside manner, because that's really easy to do. What's harder to do is to show that medicine, science, healthcare is going to fail you, not because it doesn't care generally. I feel like people generally in the healthcare industry do care. I feel like my doctors do care. The nurses care. The people that attend to me, they care. But they have to, for insurance purposes, cross out A before they go to B, before they go to C, before they go to D. And by the time they get to X, which is where your problem lies, now you've got full-blown pancreatic cancer and there ain't nothing you can do about it. And I love that there is scathing commentary on all these things that's going on here, because it's very, very real. And people get fed up with that. People get fed up with that, and they write movies that comment on those things, which speak to us, because we're all fed up with that stuff. And I am not in any way saying it's okay to shoot your healthcare insurance company CEOs on 6th Avenue in New York City. What I am saying is that people get fed up.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And they express those feelings in certain ways, and it's nice to see feelings being expressed in a movie other than jump scare.
Yeah.
Because I feel like while this movie had its fair share of jump scares, it didn't rely on it. The story is scary on its own. The scenarios are scary on their own. There is something really terrifying about an old person creeping up on you in the middle of the night. And I think that's something George Romero understood when he did his zombie movies. And no amount of fast-running zombies is ever going to be scarier than a slow-moving person in the dark.
Yeah, no, you talk about real. There was a scene that I mentioned earlier. So the scene in this movie, one of the ones that hits the closest to me for to being scary because it is so damn real. That scene where Deborah freaks out in the kitchen because she's convinced that the dude,
the shovel,
her spade,
the spade.
Oh my, like that one gets me. Like I will never, like I said, and yeah, I realized when I told you about this one and knowing about what you went through with your grandfather a couple years ago that there was going to be a lot that was going to hit home for both of us. But I will never forget one time my grandfather got it in his head that my aunt had thrown away his shoes, because when he went to the place where he was convinced that he had left them, they weren't there. Mm-hmm. And you talk about a moment where the person that you're dealing with is but isn't your person. Mm-hmm. That was that moment. He was like nothing that I had ever experienced. He wasn't trying to stab anyone. We weren't having to climb through windows to get away from him, but he was angry is putting it way too softly. Mm-hmm. He was enraged at my aunt for throwing away his shoes, which didn't happen. They were even in the same room. They just weren't in the spot where he looked, so he didn't see them. And immediately that's where his brain went, was that they must have been thrown away. So that scene, man, and she is livid. I mean, she's got, I don't know, some sort, it's like a skewer of some sort, you know, that she's trying to stab not Luis, but the other one with and he's freaking out, and they're trying to calm her down, and so they all, you know, kind of panic and search the house because we got to find her spade. It's going to be the only way we talk her down. It was right there in the freezer, which Gavin, thank you. Yeah. Which no doesn't make any sense, but also as a mostly cognizant 40-year-old man, I couldn't tell you the number of times I've found the remote in the fridge because I went to get a drink with the remote in my hand, right? Shit happens. But the level of that, the drama, the intensity of that scene, that's the scene that tells me that the writers of this movie have lived this. That's the scene that shows how scary something that seems absolutely inane to the 100% mental capacity adult. It seems nuts, but that scene shows that the people who wrote this movie have experience. They know what these moments are like, because that felt real. That was like, oh, okay, shit. Apparently that is an oddly universal experience for people with this level of dementia. That scene hits so hard, and you know, and it's, and like I said earlier, this movie, it kind of happens in two parts, because we eventually get to the point where we're 100% sure that it is not dementia, which, by the way, you know, they lead with the dementia, but once you see the scene where, oh my God, now she's standing on the counter, there's no break in the time code, the dementia thing's out the window for us, the viewer. But once the characters in the movie are 100% sure there, once she gets admitted to the hospital after the whole switchboard scene, which we can come back to. But once all of that is said and done and she's in the hospital, I alluded to this earlier. Once this thing goes off the rails, God damn, it doesn't just go off the rails. This thing goes off. This thing takes a 90-degree turn off the rails and then just continues full steam ahead. It's like that scene from the Polar Express where they hit the ice and they're just having to cut back and forth to keep the thing going straight. That's what this movie does in Act 3. In Act 3, you never have any idea what's going to happen next, because it seems like it's all just being made up while the camera's rolling. Like, suddenly she can bite people with venom, and she's spitting, and she can unhinge her jaw. And that was where I was like, you know what? Fine. Fuck it. Right? Let's go. If you're going to take this and you're going to take this ball and you're going to run with it. We had this conversation about werewolf movies. Make this your own. Don't give me The Exorcist, Emily Rose, all of that. Yeah. Give me a woman who's possessed by a man who was doing weird rituals with snakes, and now she has snake-like abilities. I fucking love it, because it came out of nowhere. You're so ready for, like, green puke, head spinning around, you know, your mother sucks cocks in hell, all that stuff. But what you get is a woman who's actively becoming a serpent in front of your eyes. And I know we have it mostly blocked out here, but if you're watching us live, in the scene behind us, she's eating a child's head, whole ass head, in her mouth, because she can unhinge her jaw. It's fucking crazy. It's so bizarre, but it's so unique and so unseen in the genre that you're taken aback and you're horrified at the same time. And I loved that.
I'm glad that we're getting into, like, the actual possession aspect of this thing. Because I've seen a few possession movies. I can't say I've seen them all, or even most of them. I am a fan of this subgenre. But the more I become disillusioned with religion, the less I watch these sorts
Fair.
of movies. However, I feel like this is the only one I can think of that picks up where The Exorcist left off in 1973 or whatever it was. There's a lot of movies, like you mentioned, Exorcism of Emily Rose. That's a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
However, it does what The Exorcist does.
Yep.
A Haunting in Connecticut does what The Exorcist does. I feel like good possession movies use The Exorcist as their mold. Whereas this movie said, oh, The Exorcist was cool, but what if?
There it is.
And that makes for something that is exciting. Because when you've seen a lot of possession movies, you're expecting another Exorcist.
Yeah, they all get formulaic.
In fact, as time has gone on, I've come to appreciate Exorcist 2. Specifically because it doesn't do what The Exorcist does.
Is that the one with Patrick Ewing? Or is that Exorcist 3? Patrick Ewing's in Exorcist 3, I think.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like Exorcist 3.
I did too.
Yeah. It's not good, but
No.
I really like Exorcist 3. I love the idea that what would have normally have been like a thriller, the investigation into this serial killer, right? Very Silence of the Lambs, becomes simply backstory here.
Yeah.
And that informs the possession. That now it's not being turned into and there is a spiritual aspect to this thing with the asps, the snakes and all of that. I love that they use the term asp.
Yes.
It always reminds me of Indiana Jones. And one of my favorite lines from Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they open up the Well of the Souls and there's all the snakes down there, right? And Salah looks at Indy, he goes, asps, very dangerous. You go first. Whenever I hear the word asp, I think of that line and John Rice Davies. He's fucking awesome. I loved how they treated possession here, because if you have something that is not you in your body, wouldn't there also be a physiological change that happens? Right? Like it's not just the metaphysical change, but like if I had the ability to play basketball, I can guarantee you that my body would have developed differently. You've met me.
Correct.
I can't bowl, much less play basketball. But if I had just a smidge, a pinch, a dash, a dollop of any sort of basketball ability in my body, my arms might have been a little bit longer because I might have used them a little more. My legs would have been a little bit longer because I would have used them more, right? And I don't know if there's any truth or science to that, but I feel like for the purpose of this argument,
I don't know
it makes sense
to argue against you. So
prove me wrong. That's yeah. I love the weird aspect of this, where it's like, why does she start turning into a snake? I don't know, but I like it. Why does she spit venom? I don't know, but I like it. And it never feels like, oh, where did that come from? It always feels like, oh shit, look at where that came from. Yeah. And those are two like nearly identical statements, but how you say things is everything.
Yeah. So I mean, let's talk a little bit more, because ultimately this is a story about people, right? So in a section they're calling They're My Family, I think what we have here at its core is a story about a woman and the people around her and that are affected by what happens to her. So, obvious choice, most obvious choice aside, we're going to save her. What's the standout performance for you here?
To me, it's Anne Ramsey as Sarah Logan.
Yeah.
She is spectacular. She is amazing. And I think that she does something which is both difficult to do and also very real, because we want to see the good son, we want to see the good daughter take care of their parent. But when the relationship is strained, we want to see them villainize that person, right? Like, oh, mom didn't do this or dad didn't do this. And that happens often. But I think what happens even more often, and something that we simply don't talk about because it's hard to do, is that sometimes our parents suck. Sometimes our parents are good. There's probably somewhere between there where our childhoods probably existed, between this was sucky and this was good. I think it's more than likely that people didn't have a completely awful childhood where it was all awful, or a completely great childhood where it was all great. Your childhood exists somewhere in between there, but you can't when your parent is suffering because now they're old and they've got all these illnesses. You can't be like, nah, man, I'm not going to take care of you because I didn't get a pony when I was, 10 years old. Or maybe even more serious, like you sent me to boarding school because I was a lesbian.
Right.
Those are the sorts of traumatic things that cause us to go to therapy, to get over, to move past. And we never really do. It gets better, but you never really get past any of the trauma that your parents instill on you. And that is, I think that's the curse of parenthood, is that no matter how good you do, no matter how much better you are than your parent was, you're going to leave some trauma on your child. And they're probably going to be there for you too.
Yeah.
Because it's genetic. It's genetic that we feel responsible for this person. Because whether they were responsible for us in a good way or responsible for us in a bad way, they were there. And we're comfortable with the things that we're familiar with, even when what we're familiar with is not great. So I loved that the pain of having a mother that was consumed by her work, who in that aspect was a very positive role model for her, that in a period when women generally were not single mothers, when they were not business owners, when they were not respected for them being themselves, for having self-worth, her mom was all those things.
Right.
But also did not give her daughter what she needed. Like, she was always giving the client what they needed. She was willing to cover up for them. She talks about how she had to cover up for some of these guys who were going and having affairs, leaving the office early. Wife would call and, she would have to direct the switchboard one way or another. And she's either holding families together or splitting them up. That's her thinking. But she could not give that attention to her daughter. So we see in Sarah such a conflicted daughter that I think is so real. And yet the love that she still has for her mother is so real. I think that is because we don't always like our parents, but we probably love them. Right? Now, I mean, there's extremes in both situations where people love and like their parents. And there's extremes where you don't like or love this person. But I feel like this speaks to a really significant group of people. And I love that was what she portrayed.
Yeah. One of the craziest things to me about this character of Sarah Logan comes from the fact that it is played by Anne Ramsey. And when I see Anne Ramsey, I think about Mad About You.
Yes, 100%.
And then I watch this movie and it's like, well, this could not be any less Mad About You, right? It's she does such a stellar job in giving us so many things. You know, when trying to be the strong rock that her mom needs when her mom is there, to the times when she's just drinking by herself and talking with the camera crew, trying to put on the media face at the beginning, and oh yeah, no, we're so glad to have you guys here, and we really want to help out, and but there is money, right? There is money, right? Like she gives us all of that. And then when she's having to deal with her mom towards the end, and she's frantic, and she finds out that her mom has murdered someone, and it doesn't faze her. Like, by the time she finds out that her mom has murdered this man, who, yes, was a murderer, more than likely, then she's like, all right, well, all things in stride, let's keep moving. My mom's in danger, so that doesn't matter right now. And then she becomes this incredibly powerful woman who's crawling through caves full of snakes and setting, body bags on fire and doing all of these things, and all without blinking. The contrast being Mia's always there right beside her, perfectly foiling everything that Sarah's going through. So Sarah is absolutely amazing and the standout character here. There's something to be said about the character of Mia that is carried throughout this movie, who serves as, like I said, a foil to Sarah. She doesn't have any emotional investment in this. We find out later that she has, we at the beginning we think she has a little bit of emotional investment. We find out very quickly, and she eventually reveals to Sarah she has no emotional investment in this. And so as things progress, and Sarah is dealing with this from the perspective of, this is my mom, but it's not my mom. We've got Mia, who this is the entire picture she has of Deb. We get the perspective of someone who doesn't know that Deb, who ran the switchboard, has been to Germany and was a powerful female figure. She just gets the picture of Deb that is painted in front of her and painted by Sarah's words. And so she is a perfect, almost an audience representation. She is us, right? Mia is the audience for the movie, given a speaking role in the movie. Whenever it's one of those things where whenever you would have a question, you realize that it's a question a lot of people must have because Mia would raise it at that moment.
Right.
And so you'd be like, oh, they saw that I would question this, and so Mia now asks that question. So there's something to be said about how this character of Mia, who also gets a pretty good character arc from, grad student who's willing to lie, cheat, steal to make this report happen, to someone who, as everyone who showed up with her is leaving one at a time, she's sticking with her. She too is crawling through a cave full of snakes to try to rescue Kara, the little girl. And so there's a really interesting dynamic between those two. Somebody who can see the whole picture and somebody who can only see parts of it, right? Like that tale about the blind men describing the elephant. One thinks he's got a snake, and they all think they have something different. Mia is one of the blind men. Sarah is the one who can stand back and look at all of this, and she's putting the pieces together quicker because she can see the whole picture. So the dynamic that we end up getting between the two of them leads to very similar but strikingly different character arcs, which I think ends up being pretty cool.
She is the perfect foil for Sarah, and you're right in that. Well, I don't think there's ever redemption for her, because I never end up coming around on her.
Right.
There is a bit of like realization that like I exploited someone. I said I wasn't going to, and even treating something with respect. If what you're looking to gain from a situation is really only for yourself, like because you need to finish your thesis, you have exploited someone. I don't know how to feel about her character.
Yeah,
if I'm being
it's weird, right?
Perfectly honest. Because I kind of hoped that she would die.
Yeah.
It felt like it would be justice, and I kind of like that I never got that, because this movie kind of is real in that way, where it's like, yeah, you know, sometimes you don't get what you want.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes people just die, and then sometimes the worst person in there lives. And that feels very real. Like with Harris, I expected Harris to make it all the way to the end.
Right.
And the fact that he didn't was surprising to me, but I didn't expect justice to come for him. I expected it to come for Mia.
Right.
And that he wasn't somehow involved in everything that was going on currently, I thought was like a great non-twist. I was waiting for the twist. I'm like, no, I mean, Harris has got to be like, that's why he doesn't want to dig in, and he doesn't want this, and he doesn't want that. And no, he really just was like a good neighbor who probably had a thing for Deborah, you know, going back to the 70s, and was just a respectful dude who never moved on that.
Yeah.
Or did, and we never find out. I don't know. But what I do know is that I hope she didn't get her doctorate. I hope the committee looked at her and said, "This is totally, like, wildly unethical what you've done here," and
Right.
You're welcome to sell this footage to the Vatican, but we'll have none of it. Thank you.
Yeah. No, you're right. There's a very interesting thing there, and yeah, Harris is one that you find yourself rooting for, even when he's drunkenly just shooting out the windows of their van. You know, it's like,
I kind of get
Harris.
it. Yeah,
I get it. Yeah. It's like, you know what? Yeah, fuck these guys. Like,
yeah.
This, you know, you know this family, you know this woman. Like, yeah, what the hell do they know? You know, so yeah, like I said, you find yourself always rooting for him, even in that moment. So there does end up being an interesting thing to him. But man, when that TV comes off and just absolutely decimates him, you know, it's heartbreaking, man. Especially because you were getting this really like tender, sweet moment where, yeah, it comes off as this is a guy who has always been in love with Deborah, but she's always been just outside reach. You know, she was a brass ring girl for it. And he was never quite able to get there. And so you were hoping that the finale of this was going to be some sort of moment where it was Harris and Sarah together, united, and the strength of them was going to draw this out of her. And again, if this movie did anything, it was absolutely circumvent any expectations you have about how it's going to go in Act 3.
And very realistically, like, there are no happy endings when it comes to dementia.
Yeah.
There's relief. That's just end. Right. There is an end. There's relief, and that's about it. So I kind of like that it is realistic in that way.
I talk about, you know, this being real and treating the subject matter with respect. The fact that they didn't get you know, get the spirit out of her, and then she like gets healthy again right away. Thank you.
Yeah.
Fucking thank you. Yes, you put a face on what was making her as bad as she was, and you destroyed it. And there was something there was a release to that. I'm sure that was a very powerful moment to write and to film for the people who made this movie. But at the end, she is still old and has Alzheimer's and is dementia ridden. but now she at least gets to live out the rest of her life with a modicum of peace. So there's a little bit to it, but the fact that is the saving grace here of keeping dementia from just being a MacGuffin. The fact that once it is removed from her, she still has dementia, and it was a vehicle, not the actual problem. That I think was huge, and so I respected that.
And that kind of leads into our final segment, which we're calling Something Different Inside You. The way that I don't know that you can call it a demonic possession is handled here, but the way that the possession is handled here. You mentioned that this is not typical in the way that possessions are depicted in popular media. Now, you as our occult specialist, is there any history of physical changes along with the metaphysical?
So I'm glad that you mentioned this is not typical of the way that the media portrays it, because the history of possession is a lot larger than the Catholic Church. It's a lot older than Christianity, and it is far more ubiquitous around the world than demonic possession. Possession itself is about more than just demons. Now, the way that it is portrayed in movies, it is usually about demons, and that is because the demon is a universally understood and feared thing. This word demon, whether it conjures up these Abrahamic Catholic images of something crawling out of hell, one of the minions who chose to side with Lucifer when he turned on the Father. Those ideas of demon are what are pop into a lot of people's heads. But the idea of possession goes far, far beyond that. I mentioned earlier, there was possession in The Serpent and the Rainbow. But that was willing possession, right? That was people who were inviting these gods into their body. So there is a lot more to possession than demonic. Now, this was a rabbit hole that, of course, I stumbled way down today. So
you're very reliable.
Thank you. Physical changes, for the most part, the way that we see physical changes shown to us in The Exorcist, in Emily Rose, in The Last Exorcist, the Last Rites, these ones that we've talked about already. Those are the type of physical changes that are usually seen. It's usually the ones that are documented are usually seen as some sort of body decaying because your soul is dying. Right. So it's like your headlight slowly turning off as your battery loses juice. Your body starts to decay as there's less and less of you present and more of this demon or this entity that is possessing you. That is the extent of kind of physical changes that I could find. When you get into true, air quotes here for the people who aren't watching live, when you get into true possession stories that are accompanied by very true exorcism stories, you get into really muddy waters on what counts as a physical change and what is just people being tortured by the people trying to exorcise them. Annalise, last name, can't remember all of a sudden. Very true story of a woman, a girl who went through something like 40 exorcisms as they were trying to get a demon out of her, because in hindsight she was probably schizophrenic. So physical changes, yes and no. In the media, we usually get and in horror stories that are told about possession, we usually get those ones that are very similar to The Exorcist. I could not find anything anywhere where somebody was taking on animalistic physical qualities. You do find a lot of exorcism stories about people who just kind of become very feral because of whatever is inside of them. It's not human. So it doesn't understand and oftentimes isn't something that ever was human. So it doesn't understand what it is to be human. So they just kind of take on the qualities of whatever it is that's possessing them. What's amazing here about this movie is possession by malevolent spirit. Possession by malevolent spirit is actually that's the oldest one. Those are the ones that people have feared for the longest time. The idea that if you murdered someone, if you wronged someone and then they died and they were out to get you, they weren't just going to poltergeist it up and throw a highball at your head. They were going to take your body and make you do awful things. They were going to ruin your life as they perceive their life to be ruined by you. Possession by malevolent spirit, as presented here, is something that I think is not explored enough in the media. There is a book called Glimpses of the Devil by M. Scott Peck, where he really delves into this idea of possession outside of the demon and how quickly everybody just assumes it is a demon. And so then it starts to get really heady about this idea. You mentioned earlier the Catholic idea that the devil is a physical thing. It starts to get really heady with this idea of, if the devil's an idea and you're possessed by a malevolent spirit, then does that count as being possessed by the devil? All of that to say, what we get here is a very relatable possession story. You mentioned earlier that as you find yourself to be less and less religious, you find yourself turning more and more away from those movies. I tend to still watch them, but tend to not find them as scary because of the fact that they attack this movie and this idea of terror solely from the idea that religion is ultimately going to be what saves the day. That always is kind of a turnoff for me. Right. And so I love that this one, there was something concrete that they could do that defeated this entity. It was very supernatural-esque, right? Like, you got to find what's left and you got to burn it. Tale as old as time. And so I love that this movie approaches possession as something that has nothing to do with religion. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you believe in God, if you know a priest. It doesn't matter if this is something you know about or don't know about, because religion has absolutely nothing to do with this. All that matters here is that there was an absolutely terrible human being, which absolutely exists. He was killed in a very violent and awful way, which happens. And his energy was left in this realm, on this plane of existence, to wreak havoc. And as long as there was physical form to what was once this awful human being, then that energy still exists. That is scary as shit. Yes, that is why that is why you look at these things and you go, for everything that happened in this movie at the top, I said it feels grounded in reality. We've used the phrase, it feels very real, 1,000 times. The way that this possession itself goes down feels so damn possible that makes it scary. And I love that. When you watch one that's about a demon and a priest has to come in and there's all these other things, you go, but for this to be scary, I have to believe in hell and demons. Not quite there, right? So now this isn't scary. There's a couple of other real quick things about this. I do love that they integrated in some very tale as old as time mythology about what happens to people when they are possessed. The moment when she can now speak French, speaking languages that you did not know before you were possessed. That is one of the big checks that they got to make when they're going to decide whether or not they're going to make an exorcism, that they're going to do an exorcism. You do. Oh, suddenly speaking Hebrew. That's weird, right? Well, now she could speak French. And so I love that they did that. I do love, we've said it before on this. We appreciate any and all nudity. We're men of taste. I appreciate the dedication that the horror movie continues to find to the naked old person. I can only hope that someday when I'm old, somebody's like, you know what that fat old guy would be perfect for? A naked guy in the next A24 movie. Somebody give him a call.
I'm waiting for the call today because nobody the person that you want to see nude in a movie in these kinds of horror movies, it's never the person that's gonna take their clothes off.
Right. Why did I have to see everybody but Florence Pugh naked in Midsommar? Because
art. All I'm saying is, Ari Aster, you've got your canvas right here.
Look at this man.
I'm willing to take it off. All right. Specifically because no one wants to see it.
So there's this movie, I think, checks a lot of boxes for possession that we don't get to see a lot. And I'm so happy that we came out of the gate with this one, and knowing what I know about where we're going to go forward with this one, I think this was an excellent groundwork to now continue to talk about possessions, because this one, man, this one did me in when it came to, like I said, research and stuff today. I have read so much about possession by jinn, voluntary possession, demonic possession. Like I have been so deep in it today, just trying to be like, was there one time when someone unhinged their jaw, or was this guy just like, you know what would be rad? And ultimately, when it's all said and done, I think that he was like, you know, it'd be cool as fuck. She just ate that girl's head.
And you know what? I think that works more for me.
Yeah.
The fact that he was like, you know what would be so fucking cool? If she turned into the fucking snake. I don't know that that's how he talks, but to me, that's such a dude bro thing where it's like, bro, you know, it'd be fucking sick. Because really, when you stop and think about it, that's what we want out of movies. You want to leave the theater and say, dude, that was fucking wild.
Yes.
And that's what we get in the last part of this movie. I am not even bothered by the fact that cameras don't behave the way that we see the camera behaving at the end of the movie. That flickering thing, I don't know what the fuck that is. Didn't add anything to the atmosphere for me. But what was going on in the front of that camera was so damn cool that I don't give a fuck anymore. You know, like just like in Iron Man 3. Is Iron Man 3 a good movie? Absolutely not. It is not. But is that scene where they do the deadfall from the plane and he's catching all the people by fucking zapping them so they close their hands shut really goddamn cool? You best believe that it is. All right. And when that's happening, you know what I'm thinking? Like, yo, that shit's tight. That shit's tight. I mean, you do reach a point where it's like, okay, listen, the movie just fucking is terrible. It's like a Last Jedi. You know, it's like it's garbage. It's just garbage. You know, it's I don't care how cool that lightsaber battle was. I don't care that they killed the giant bald dude. Doesn't fucking matter. You know, the rest of the movie was garbage. So I can't let that one little thing at the end get in the way. I did have to tell myself, no, don't let it bother you. Because it really was so damn cool what we got to see here. And I think it was a cool way of making us think about the classic cinematic possessions that we've seen. Because there was a moment, and I tried to keep going back and forth and go frame by frame. I couldn't get it. But I'm pretty sure we get a flash of a face.
Oh, I texted it to you. Did you not get that picture during the switchboard scene?
That was the face?
Yes, I did. I scrubbed it. It took me 9 times of scrubbing back and forth, but I did get the one frame of the really bizarre, fucked up, decaying face that did show up for one frame. Yeah, that's the face I texted you.
And thank you. I couldn't figure out what point in the movie that was, but I did see your text. I love that we get these things because it is a callback to The Exorcist. And it is classic possession in that way, but also give me that new shit, right?
Yeah.
Like when we're watching an Alien movie, for example, right? Like I need to see a classic xenomorph, but don't just give me the same Ridley Scott stuff, right? Give me something fresh, give me something new, right? That's one of the reasons why Alien Romulus works so well, is because it wasn't just the classic xenomorph. We got the classic xenomorph, and that was great. But give me something more, and this movie really, really does that. I also think that what's her name? The actress who played Deborah Logan.
Oh, Jill
yes.
From All My Children.
Yes, that's what it was. Oh God. So many faces from NBC that
exactly.
that I couldn't quite place. Although, no, I placed Anne Ramsey right away. I was a big fan of Mad About You. And I am mad that only 1 season is available for purchase.
Really?
Why only season 3? It is the best of all the seasons, but why? Give me the others. All right. I will gladly hand over my hard-earned cash. My earned cash. My what I get paid. I will hand that over to you. All right. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. She did a great job of portraying the human element of the possession, but also of the dementia side of this possession, right? Which is not the actual possession, but also the possession side.
Yeah.
The possessed Deborah does not look like dementia Deborah, does not look like clear Deborah.
Yeah.
And it's subtle for each of them, but her acting is fantastic, much better than you would think from daytime soap opera. And I, like you say, kudos to anyone that is willing to, for the benefit of the movie, do a nude scene.
Yeah.
Because I to me, it was tasteful, because what the fuck are you gonna do with someone who you've just seen them like peel their fucking skin off? What are you gonna do? You're not immediately gonna rip their clothes off to take their vital signs? Like, that's to me, that was one of those things. Like, it felt natural, it felt normal. Kudos to her. Like, I mean, she's an elderly lady. Is she still alive?
I don't believe so. Let's see what we got here. She is, yes, she's still alive. She is 77 years old.
Damn. All right. So actually, she wasn't that old when she did this.
She was not as old as she appeared to be in that movie, because she's just now 77.
Yeah. So kudos to her, man, because that's I say that Ari Aster, I'm ready for, for my full frontal shot, but I'm not.
I'm all talk.
I got to be really old for that shit. I got to not care. I got to not care anymore, or really be an artist. And I'm not a fucking artist. So, that's, she was spectacular.
Yeah. So there you have it. That's the Taking of Deborah Logan. And it's time for us to get to, Dave's going to have to finally make a decision, because it's time for us to rate this thing. So quick reminder, as we always do at this section, we never rate a movie against other movies. We've mentioned plenty of other exorcism movies and possession movies and those of the like, but we're not comparing it to any of those. We are only looking at what this movie itself gave us. So as we leave the Taking of Deborah Logan in our rearview mirror, we're going to peel out, and just like Gavin, we're going to honk the horn of our van. So Dave, out of a possible 5 horns that play Dixie, what do you give the Taking of Deborah Logan?
Okay. I know that the only issues I have with this movie are my own. I know it. But I'm the one giving the rating.
Fair.
ChatGPT's not giving this rating. You know, I feel things. And how I feel is that I shouldn't dock this movie any significant number of horns that play Dixie because of my own hangups. That's how I feel. Now, can I dock it an insignificant number of horns that play Dixie? That I think I can do. Because like I've done before, I can't put my finger on why it's not perfect. Or rather I can, but I just don't like the reason why.
Fair.
Which is me. I'm the problem, it's me. So I'm only gonna dock it half a horn that plays Dixie. And I'm gonna go with a 4.5 because in quite literally every other way than my own emotional unavailability am I able to really appreciate this movie. And I think that I would recommend this movie to anyone, whether they have had to help someone with dementia or not, and maybe even particularly if they have. This movie's kind of cathartic, and beautiful and sad all at once. But most of all, for the purpose of this podcast, it is very, very scary. So 4.5 horns that play Dixie.
I am right there with you, except for you at least could eloquently explain why you were docking it half a horn that plays Dixie. I can't. For as much as I love this movie, there's a je ne sais quoi missing that I don't understand. Right?
You speak French?
Yeah. Look. Oh,
are you possessed?
Son of a bitch. I put on such.
I am the fuck out of here.
But there's something that ticks it back just a little bit. But I do love this movie. I think that it's very scary. I think that we are given some very powerful performances. And I think that it approaches possession in something that feels a lot more relatable and a lot more real to a lot of people who aren't Catholic, which is, you know, great because there's a lot more of us than them. So, so I too am going to go with 4.5 horns that play Dixie.
Nice. Okay. I don't know if I expected this, but I feel like I came up from where I initially thought I was. That's nice. That's very nice.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah, it is a good feeling. Yeah.
So there a unanimous 4.5 horns that play Dixie out of 5 for the Taking of Deborah Logan. And we are going to continue possession movies now. Make sure you head over to shiverpod.com where you can find links to all of our social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. All of those places at ShiverPod. You're going to want to make sure you follow closely because we do plan on doing episodes for the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. However, they are not going to be on Wednesdays. Next Wednesday, I've got something going on, and the Wednesday after that's Christmas. So we are going to work out a schedule that works for us. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook. That's where you're going to find the updates on when we will be doing the episodes for the next 2 weeks. We have got 2 in store for you that you have heard us talk about. One that we were supposed to do, one that you've just heard us talk about a lot, but we have 2 great ones coming up. We're going to end this year with episode 150. 150 episodes of Shiver by the end of 2024. It's a great place to be. So make sure you follow us on all those social media outlets. Again, thank you to everybody who's out there, you know, sharing us, letting the world know if we're on your Spotify Wrapped. We would love to see that. We won't show you if it's on ours because, you know, that's just try not to listen to myself too much. But the greats watch their own footage. That's okay. Tom Brady, I'm sure, watched himself take a couple snaps.
I love the sound of my voice.
So thank you guys so much for listening. To everybody who's hung around for the episode tonight, we really appreciate you if you were listening to us live, and we can't wait to tell you what's going to be next week.
Absolutely. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very